good morning to all of you. Over the last weeks, the world has been facing a major health crisis, which is already having a substantial economic impact on every continent, with no exception. Contrary to the 2008 crisis, this economic crisis has a direct impact on the real economy. In France, hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs, from the smallest to the biggest, have been hit by this crisis. The crisis is global. No country will be spared. No continent will be spared. The virus has no borders. Value chains are completely interlinked, and our economies are dependent on each other. Just as economic growth was global yesterday, the economic crisis will be global tomorrow. And this crisis will be long. China was the first to be severely affected. Then came Europe, and now the United States. This also means that economic recovery in Europe and throughout the world will be long, drawn out, difficult, and costly. There will be no miracle solution. Recovery will require countless effort. Economic effort to finance the recovery. Solidarity effort, especially between European countries. And some imagination effort to build tomorrow's world. To tackle the crisis, France has acted fast and strongly. Already on March the 6th, I presented to President Macron an emergency response plan which is currently being implemented by the government. It is based on 3 pillars. Pillar 1, supporting employees. We set up a partial unemployment scheme worth approximately 11 billion euros, guaranteeing up to 4.5 times the minimum salary. This is currently the most generous scheme in Europe. Already 4 million employees benefit from it. Pillar 2, cash flow facilities for companies. We have already deferred all social security contributions for all companies requesting it. We have set up a solidarity fund, and 330,000 companies have already made use of. We introduced a state guarantee for all new loans up to 300 billion euros. 40,000 companies already benefit from it and have asked for 7 billion euros of loans, with an average loan of 130,000 euros per company. Pillar 2, protecting strategic companies. I have sent to President Macron a list of companies, strategic companies, that could potentially be jeopardized in the market. We will be ready to resort to all means available to protect these companies by increasing the share participation of the French state, by recapitalizing, or, as a last resort, by nationalizing. Let me be clear. We will remain coherent in our economic policy. I am not calling for a state-administrated economy. The state's purpose is not to manage the economy. If nationalizations are needed, there will be temporary ones. But the state is responsible for protecting its industrial flagship companies. Exceptional circumstances calls for exceptional measures. In this crisis, Europe also has a decisive responsibility. Either Europe stays true to its political roots and it will thrive, or Europe gives in to panic and national self-image and it will disappear. Europe's political roots are about solidarity. Europe's political roots are about security. Europe's political roots are about human dignity, in particular in times of sickness. These are the roots we have to go back to. Siamo tutti italiani. Todos somos España. We are all Europeans. Europe has already taken the right economic and financial decisions. I want to pay tribute to these decisions. By activating the General Escape Clause, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, took the right decision. It allows us to support the economy beyond the Stability and Growth Pact rules. The 750 billion euros of the European Central Bank were the right decision taken by her President Christine Lagarde. And suspending the state aid rules was also the right decision. But the EU now needs to go further and act stronger to support our economies. We are actively working on with all our European partners, especially with Olaf Scholz. I can assure you that the French-German economic and financial cooperation is positive and takes place on a daily basis. The Europeans should use all the existing crisis instruments. I'm thinking, first of all, about activating the European Stability Mechanism with light conditionalities and without any stigma on any country, something we should be able to agree on at the next Eurogroup. I'm also thinking about activating new financing from the European Investment Bank for a total amount of about 200 billion euros. I'm thinking, lastly, about creating an unemployment reinsurance scheme for a total amount of 100 billion euros as proposed by Ursula von der Leyen. These three instruments could be our common European framework to immediately face the economic crisis. In addition to this framework, the EU should be reflecting on long-term instruments that would be useful to restart the economy after the crisis. Europe needs solidarity. Solidarity means common financial means fit to this challenge we all have to face. Solidarity means to be able to pool together our resources to cope with the aftermath of the crisis. Let's avoid any ideological debates on Eurobonds or Corona bonds. There is one single political question. Shall we stand together or not? Shall we stand together as a unified continent to face the long-term and dramatic consequences of the economic crisis? Or shall we give to the world the sad image of a continent divided between the North and the South? As the French President explained, we are one single continent facing the same crisis, and we should stand together. That's why France has proposed to create an exceptional and temporary joint fund dedicated to helping all EU countries kickstart the recovery phase in a coordinated way. This fund would have one single strategic purpose: to help and coordinate the necessary economic stimulus that will be needed to restart the European economy once the health crisis is over. This fund will issue bonds with a joint and several guarantees of all EU member states. This fund would be operated by the European Commission and would finance programmes designed to increase the capacity of our healthcare systems and to kickstart the economy. It would operate in a way that would be coherent with the Green Deal and the industrial strategy put forward by the Commission on March the 10th, especially to contribute to a relocation in Europe of strategic value chains. Countries would benefit from the fund, depending on the economic damage undergone as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. The fund would be limited in time, between 5 and 10 years, and focused on the economic recovery. To avoid any confusion with the current budget negotiations, the fund would not be within the multi-annual financial framework, but outside. Common bonds issued by the fund could be reimbursed in the long term through a new and exceptional resource, such as a solidarity tax or a contribution of member states. Finally, the EU should rethink its economic model with a strategic objective which President Macron has referred to: economic sovereignty. This pandemic is a unique occasion to reflect collectively on how to reorganize value chains and how to relocate some key activities. It is a unique occasion to reflect on the necessary investments for the health sector and how to better protect our borders. We should not be scared of the word protection. Protection is not the same as protectionism. Protection is the legitimate defense of our most strategic economic assets. These events have shed a new light on an already advanced assessment process that we started 2 years ago with German Minister for the Economy, Peter Altmaier. For some time, we have been asking for a new European industrial policy, an update of the EU's competition policy, and to work on limiting the industrial dependence of some strategic sectors, for instance, electric batteries and artificial intelligence. Now it's time to go further. We have had the right instructions about European industrial sovereignty. It is time we put these views into practice. I'm utterly convinced that with this crisis, the European Union has a historical opportunity to become an economic and political superpower between the United States and China. The EU should seize this opportunity and seize it right now. To conclude, I would like to stress that in every major economic crisis, the weakest are the hardest hit. It is our responsibility to avoid a tragedy in developing countries, more specifically in Africa. France supports in particular the idea of a special drawing rights allocation in the range of $500 billion. We should also introduce a swap line instrument at the IMF to provide liquidity support to countries in need. And we support a moratorium on the debt for the poorest countries in the months to come. The Paris Club, which has a long-standing experience of dealing with such situations, should be at the forefront of the work on such an initiative. As Economy and Finance Minister, I fully understand how brutal this crisis is for all our citizens, as well for all European citizens. I'm convinced that we will overcome this crisis. Our economies are strong. Our industry is solid. French and European technologies are up to the challenge. If we stay together, we shall overcome the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
I'm ready to respond to your questions. So, Melanie, please.
Thank you, Minister. We have a lot of questions from different countries. One first question is about the fund you are proposing. From different media are asking what size should this fund have?
I don't want to give any figure about the fund. I just want to recall what Thierry Breton this morning explained. The current instruments won't be enough. We need to do more. And we have to think about the post-crisis situation. We have taken the first right decisions. And once again, I want to thank the Commission, the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the ECB for the decisions they have taken. They were the right decisions at the right time. Now we are thinking about the second set of decisions that we should take under the leadership of the European Council next week on Tuesday, exactly during the next meeting of the finance ministers. And I made 3 proposals which could be our common framework, and I hope that we will be able to deliver on those 3 proposals next week on Tuesday at the level of the finance ministers. And then there is the last solution, the long-term solution. We need something stronger, which would be the clear evidence of the solidarity we want to build on. I just want to recall the principles. We are proposing a fund which would be limited in time, focused on the response to the crisis, outside the MFF, and of course we are ready to discuss the size of this fund. But I think this is a fair proposal which could address the concern of many countries and respond to the crisis at the right level with the right amount.
Next question. Maybe from the Netherlands, NOS and Volkskrant are asking, what is your position on the proposal made by Mr. Rutte yesterday?
I think that the proposal from the Netherlands is a first step in the right direction, because now there is something very positive. Everybody is aware that there is a lack of solidarity among European countries. And that it's time now to show our solidarity to face the crisis. And this is, I think, a very positive signal. Now we have to build on a very concrete instrument. And the concrete instrument we are proposing goes a little bit further. We want to have this common fund, and we put this as a starter for discussion. We think this is the right instrument. We think that what has been proposed by President Macron through this instrument is the right response to the crisis. We have still some time to discuss about it. But once again, it's good news that everybody now in Europe is aware of necessity of showing a clear and strong solidarity among the member states.
One question from Handelsblatt. According to Klaus Regling, it would take more than a year to set up a new funding vehicle. Why don't you seize the proposal of Olaf Scholz for at least 100 billion ESM credits without any conditionality, plus EIB credits, plus 50 or so billions for unemployment insurance?
That's exactly the common framework we are proposing, and we have been discussing with Olaf on those 3 pillars. And I think that on those 3 pillars, we have a clear common understanding with Germany. We fully agree on the necessity to activate the ESM, once again with light conditionalities and without putting our finger on any state. Everybody should support that idea. We agree on the necessity of having new loans from the European Investment Bank. And we fully agree on the necessity to have a kind of reinsurance unemployment scheme as proposed by Ursula von der Leyen. These are the 3 pillars on which we should find a compromise next week at the level of the finance ministers. But then, once again, I'm insisting on this point. There is clearly a need to go further to address the key question of the economic recovery. Do not underestimate the profound and violent consequences of this crisis on our economies. There will be a need for something more. And that's exactly the door we want to keep open, and that's exactly the sense of the proposal we are putting on the table of this common fund to help the economic recovery and to be sure that this economic recovery will be strong and rapid.
Maybe a question from Dow Jones. Would France be ready to go ahead on a special vehicle on your idea with only a group of European member states, 9 countries or more, if the agreement of 19 member states is too difficult to find?
If you want to build on solidarity, you need to have everybody on board. Having new instruments without all the Eurozone member states and all the members of the EU would be, I think, an economic and a political mistake. We need everybody on board. Solidarity is not solidarity if you have one or many member states outside this solidarity. Once again, I'm really happy to see that now this word of solidarity is something that everybody understands and supports. But it's time to go from the word to the decisions.
I have several questions from Spiegel. Maybe I can ask one in German, if you'd like. So Spiegel is asking, wie realistisch ist ein gemeinsamer deutsch-französischer Vorschlag in den kommenden 2 Wochen? Und wie weit sind Sie in dieser Hinsicht in Ihren Gesprächen mit den deutschen Partnern?
Ich glaube, das ist sehr realistisch und ich glaube wirklich, dass in dieser Zeit Vorschläge von Frankreich und Deutschland von höchster Wichtigkeit sind. Und ich kann wirklich behaupten, dass die Zusammenarbeit zwischen Deutschland und Frankreich ist hervorragend. Unsere Standpunkte nähern sich immer weiter an. Olaf Scholz und ich, wir sind uns beide dessen bewusst, dass die Wirtschaften unserer beiden Ländern fest miteinander verbunden sind und dass Europa, ich würde sagen, vor einem Wendepunkt seiner Geschichte steht. Die deutsch-französische Zusammenarbeit ist nun wichtiger als je zuvor. Und ich würde auch hinzufügen, dass unter diesen Bedingungen ist die deutsch-französische Zusammenarbeit absolute Priorität. Wir zählen auf unsere deutschen Freunde. Und ich würde sagen, ganz Europa zählt auf Deutschland.
Dankeschön. A question from Italy, Il Messaggero. Italy is particularly facing the consequences of the crisis, and the Italian government is strongly asking for a special instrument. Is France working with Italy on a common project of Eurobond, and is France ready to go ahead, even without the agreement of all member states of the Eurogroup? Sorry.
You know, we are working very closely with all European states, especially with the members of the Eurozone. We have a very close relationship with Roberto Gualtieri. We are working very good. And first of all, I would like to express my full sympathy for the Italian people. Because what the Italian people is living right now is something so sad, so difficult. Everybody should be aware of the gravity of the situation and of the necessity of expressing full solidarity with the Italian people. And that's the first thing I would like to say. Then we are working very closely with Roberto on the measures that we could take next week, and we fully support the idea of having a common instrument like the one France is proposing with this common fund. And I hope that at the end of the process, we will be all on the same boat, defending new measures and a long-term plan for the economic recovery in Europe.
Thank you. A question from Le Monde on whether it still makes sense to have a European budget, an MFF, on over 7 years.
Je vais répondre en français au Monde. D'abord pour rappeler la gravité de la crise que nous vivons. C'est une crise qui est violente, elle touche l'économie réelle. C'est une crise qui est globale. Aucun pays, aucun continent n'est épargné. Et c'est une crise qui sera longue. Ne pensons pas que du jour au lendemain, l'économie européenne ou mondiale repartira. Ce sera long, ce sera difficile et ce sera coûteux. Raison de plus pour commencer à réfléchir à la manière dont nous soutenons notre économie européenne tous ensemble. Il y a une série de réponses sur laquelle nous travaillons pour mardi prochain, à la demande du Conseil européen, pour apporter des réponses économiques supplémentaires. L'utilisation du mécanisme européen de stabilité, sans conditions excessives et sans singulariser un État ou un autre. L'utilisation de nouvelles facilités de prêt par la Banque européenne d'investissement et l'idée d'un système d'assurance chômage commun. Ce sont les 3 piliers sur lesquels nous travaillons et sur lesquels j'espère que nous pourrons trouver un consensus la semaine prochaine au niveau des ministres des Finances, comme cela nous a été demandé par le Conseil européen. Et puis il y a la dernière réponse, qui est la réponse de long terme. C'est la proposition que nous faisons d'un fonds qui serait financé à une hauteur qui reste à définir, qui aurait une durée limitée de 5 à 10 ans, qui aurait pour vocation de répondre spécifiquement à la crise économique que nous sommes en train de vivre et qui pourrait être financé soit par des contributions volontaires des États, soit par une fiscalité spécifique, et qui permettrait de marquer la solidarité des États membres de l'Union européenne face à cette crise économique qui n'épargne personne. Donc voilà le schéma dans lequel nous nous inscrivons. La proposition que nous faisons, elle n'a de sens que si elle fait l'objet d'un compromis global. Rien ne serait pire pour l'Europe que d'avoir demain des réponses à la crise qui soient partagées par les uns et repoussées par les autres. Et nous ne ménagerons avec le président de la République aucun effort pour bâtir cette solidarité européenne. Nous ne ménagerons aucun effort pour convaincre tous nos partenaires de parvenir à une solution globale, puissante et partagée.
Thank you. A question from the FAZ. What is your position on the President von der Leyen's proposal for a European scheme of short-time work?
We fully support this proposal from Ursula von der Leyen, and I think that this kind of proposal could take place in this global framework that we could adopt next week at the level of the finance ministers.
One question from Bloomberg. You have said France will undertake further stimulus to reboot the economy after the health crisis. What kind of size will this be? The stimulus plan a decade ago targeted car makers. This time, is it better to target consumers, industry, services, or construction? And will you coordinate this with the EU?
First of all, I would like to recall the figures of the first economic plan that we have already adopted. We have 45 billion euros of treasury measures or new financing measures. We have also a state guarantee up to 300 billion euros for new loans for the private companies. These are the 2 pillars of the economic plan on which we are working and that has been already decided. Then there will be a necessity for a stimulus plan after the crisis. Of course, we have already started thinking about this plan. And I think that the main features could be the 3 following ones. The first one is that the priority should be investment. Investment will be the key priority if we want to kickstart our economy and help our economy to recover as quickly as possible. Investment should be the first point of this plan after the crisis. The second point is to focus our help, and especially our financial help, on some key industrial sectors that have been particularly hit by the crisis. I'm thinking, of course, of the automotive industry, but there are also other sectors that might be in the scope of this special plan. And then the third principle should be the cooperation and the coordination among the members of the Eurozone and among the EU member states. If we want to be efficient, we clearly need a strong coordination among the 19 members of the Eurozone. Let's take the example of the automotive car industry. If we do not have the same approach between France, Germany, Italy, Spain and other members of the Eurozone, we run the risk of not being as efficient as we should be. Investment, focus on some strategic sectors, coordination among EU member states, that's the three principles for the plan we are working on.
Thank you. I have still some questions about the fund, which I will group. France 24, EFE, the Spanish presidency, are asking basically, on the one hand, what does Germany and the Netherlands think about your proposal? And then have you also discussed this proposal with Spain and Italy? And for both groups of countries, how will you convince them? And then maybe one additional question about the fund from Le Monde and FAZ. Could you give us more details about the way to fund this new fund? Sorry, you mentioned the special tax.
So first of all, we are in the process of discussing our proposal. So we have presented our proposal to Germany, and I've been discussing this proposal with Olaf Scholz at the beginning of this week. We are in the process of consulting Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, the presidency of the Eurogroup. So we are in the process of consulting, and we will see next week whether it's possible to find a common ground on this long-term approach. But once again, as Thierry Breton said this morning, there is clearly a need for some more instruments that would be at the level of the economic challenge that we will have to face after the crisis. And my responsibility as the finance minister is also to think about the long-term consequences of the crisis and the best way of addressing the many difficulties that we will have to face on the long term. Do not think that this crisis will only lapse 1, 2 or 3 months and that thereafter we will come back to the normal situation. It won't be the case. As far as the fund is concerned, it would issue common debt, and it could be reimbursed through national contributions or a solidarity tax. So these are the two proposals we are putting on the table, either national contributions or a national solidarity tax. These are the two proposals we are putting on the table for the reimbursement of the common debt.
Thank you very much. Maybe one last question from the NRC Handelsblad from the Netherlands. Is France considering state support for Air France KLM? Is nationalization on the table, and could this lead to the breakup of Air France KLM?
Air France KLM is a beautiful company, and we want Air France KLM to stay as it is. And that's why we are ready to support Air France KLM. I don't want to be more explicit on the kind of support we can give to Air France KLM, but we will not let Air France-KLM alone, facing the very violent crisis that the airplane companies are facing now. Thank you, and have a good day.